Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda, and I'm so glad to see you today. Today, we're going to continue on with our exploration of the New Testament. Particularly, we're looking at some of the stories in the New Testament. If you recall, I started my journey in religion in Christianity. I grew up in it. I was in Christianity for 40 years. During that time, I taught Sunday school and I also taught confirmation. And so I have knowledge and background that not everyone has. So this scripture is purely to share some of the stories that I taught during Sunday school, and then we'll read the story. We'll talk about how I helped the kids connect with the story, how I made it applicable to their lives, and then I'll also share a little bit about why I now have problems with that story, just based on my new information and my new knowledge. Okay, so today we are talking about the story of Mary and Martha. So let's dive in, shall we? So the story of Mary and Martha is what we are talking about today. I'm going to go ahead and read the story from the Good News Bible. I have today's English version, which is the version that I have at my house because that's what I was gifted when I started my third grade year of Sunday school, when I had enough knowledge to have a Bible of my own. So the story of Mary and Martha is one that I related to growing up because it's about two sisters, and of course they're bickering. I myself have two sisters, one older, one younger, who I love dearly now, but growing up we were not always the best of friends. We certainly bickered quite a bit, and I would say I was the peacemaker. My sisters would definitely disagree with that. They would say I was rather the instigator quite a few times. So the story of Mary and Martha, I always connected with growing up just because they were sisters. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into reading the story so you can hear it for yourself. This story, it's actually called Jesus Visits Mary and Martha and Mary. Martha and Mary are sisters again. And it's found in the book of Luke, Luke being one of the four Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the four Gospels. We are in the book of Luke, chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Okay? And it's called Jesus Visits Martha and Mary, or Jesus Visits Mary and Martha. It doesn't really matter the order of that. As Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat down at the feet of the Lord and listened to his teaching. Martha was upset over all the work she had to do, so she came and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to come and help me." The Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled over so many things, but just one is needed. Mary has chosen the right thing, and it will not be taken away from her." So, can you see why I connected with this story as a young girl with two sisters? So the idea that one person was doing all the work and the other person was basically sitting there and listening and soaking up all this attention, it felt unfair to me. And in the story, Jesus says, well, no, the person who's giving me all this attention is the one who's doing the right thing, because the tasks don't matter. What matters is me and being in my presence. Okay, now that troubles me because it seems very egotistical to me. And they came to her house for a reason, and they would be rather miffed if they couldn't have anything to drink, they couldn't have any food, because they didn't have all that stuff prepared if they were both to sit at the feet like Mary did. This story just irks me. It feels like Jesus wants all the attention. And again, I believe Jesus is just a man. He's nothing special. He shouldn't need to be the center of all the attention. Feels like he's a bit of a narcissist sometimes. Okay? But I jumped ahead of myself. Let's back up and talk about what we talked about with the kids. When we would talk about this story, we would talk about being fair and doing our part. We would talk about if they were playing Barbies with their sister and only one of them cleaned up everything, was that really fair? If they got a donut on a Sunday morning and they were supposed to share it, but one person ate the whole thing, was that really fair? How does that make you feel? If it makes your heart feel sad, do you think it makes God's heart feel sad because you weren't being fair? Does it make Jesus' heart feel sad because you weren't being fair? And many times we would skip God and we would go to Jesus, because Jesus was supposed to be the personal resemblance of God on earth. So it was easier for us to connect or relate to a person. Whereas God isn't a person. He isn't an entity that can be described in a way that a 4-year-old can understand it. So they tended to focus more on Jesus and basically saying, if it makes your heart feel sad, would it make Jesus' heart feel sad? Yeah. So it was a little bit of a guilt trip. And me knowing what I know now, I know that that's not healthy to just constantly be guilt tripping people, and kind of putting it out there like, oh, Jesus is judging you because you did this, or like, it doesn't need to be that artificial judgment. There are requests made out of love in the Jewish scriptures, and that's what we should focus on, in my opinion. There isn't a need for this story. There isn't a need for us to judge each other. There's just not a need. If as Christians, they believe in a day of judgment. So that day of judgment may be when they die. It may be when the rapture comes, depending on their beliefs. But it's not for the individual people to judge individual people. It's for Jesus to judge, or God to judge. It's not the person's job. And I feel like in this story, there's an awful lot of judgment. Martha is judging Mary. Jesus is judging Martha. And I'm sure the disciples were judging as well. There's so much judgment and so much being concerned with what everybody else is doing and how they are in relationship to how that individual is. It's just not needed. Don't focus on other people and if they're doing better or worse than you. Focus on, are you doing the best you can at this moment? Are you focusing on what you need to do in order to strengthen your relationship with God? That makes so much more sense to me than focusing on what somebody else thinks. And to me, knowing what I know now, if Martha had a problem with what Mary was doing, I don't feel like she should have went to Jesus and said, Jesus, he's not helping. You should tell her to come help. No, how about you put on your big girl panties and you talk to your sister? Whether you have people there or not, you can talk to them and you can pull your sister aside or huff and puff and do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better and talk to them after. But you don't need to put Jesus in the middle. You don't need to put God in the middle. You need to do what's best for you. It's not hurting anyone if she's doing her best and it's not meeting your expectations. But if you have expectations and you're not voicing them, that blame and that fault falls to you, in my opinion. So that's just my understandings and my view of the story now that I know a little bit more. Because the more we know, the more we grow. And that's what I always aim to do. So if you like today's presentation, please go ahead and like this video and hit subscribe so you can hear the next presentation that we're going to have. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.